Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty unconventional philosophical framework by an author named Su Feng. We're looking at the fundamental nature of reality itself. It's the kind of concept that completely flips how we view everything around us, from, the messy rooms we live in, all the way to the very fabric of our global societies.
So, let's kick things off with a massive, foundational question, one that's basically been puzzling philosophers for centuries. Does your world shape your mind, or does your mind shape your world? It sounds like a purely theoretical riddle, right? Well, according to our source material, it's actually anything but.
What's super interesting here is the author's claim that how you answered the single question literally dictates your destiny. It's not just some fun debate over, say, whether you prefer steamed buns or noodles. The author insists that whichever comes first, your environment or your thoughts, determines the exact kind of life you're going to have.
Section 1. The Great Philosophical Divide.
The author defines this ultimate watershed in human thought as the divide between materialism and idealism. On one side, you've got materialism. That's the belief that physical existence determines consciousness, meaning the physical world shapes your mind. And on the flip side is idealism, where consciousness determines existence. Your mind shapes the physical world. The text argues that humanity, by and large, just hasn't grasped the correct answer to this yet.
Section 2. 5 types of people.
To explain this divide, the author actually breaks humanity down into 5 categories, starting at the bottom with the ignorant, who are driven by pure survival instinct, then up to the laity, driven by material desires like money and status, and then the mortals, who live for emotional affection. For these first 3 groups, the author says existence dictates their consciousness. Take away their physical or social realities, and they'd basically collapse. But move up the ladder, and we reach the sages. They're driven by reason, and they see mind and matter as equals. Finally, right at the top, are the saints, or immortals. Driven purely by spirituality, they are supposedly the only ones who truly get that consciousness creates reality. And the author notes, if you try to tell them otherwise, they'll just think you're ignorant.
Section 3. Imagination precedes physical creation.
Now, the author uses a great rhetorical approach here to make his point, asking us to consider the origin of human inventions. Seriously, think about it for a second. How did cars appear on Earth? They definitely didn't just sprout out of the ground or magically appear out of thin air.
He emphatically concludes that absolutely everything artificial existed first as an imagination in human consciousness, way before it ever became a physical reality. Someone literally had to imagine the structure of a house before laying a single brick. Fashion designers had to conceptualize trends before a single stitch was sewn. Without human consciousness and imagination, none of the artificial objects we use today would even exist. For the author, this is clear, undeniable proof that consciousness determines existence.
Section 4. Consciousness shaping our environments.
Taking this a step further, he argues that a tidy, beautiful home versus a totally chaotic one isn't merely about the physical items inside. Instead, it's a direct reflection of the underlying spatial layout consciousness of the owner. If you walk into a harmonious room with beautifully arranged furniture and, flowers on the windowsill, it's because the owner holds a clear, orderly spatial format in their mind. If their consciousness is chaotic, well, you might just find a coffee table stacked right on top of the dining table.
Drawing a pretty highly subjective cultural comparison, the author then contrasts the neatness of Caucasian residences he observed over 10 years in Zimbabwe, with manicured lawns and spotless kitchens, against what he describes as messy Chinese environments. He points specifically to overgrown courtyards and his son's observation of a dirty Chinatown in New York. Now, he directly attributes these differences not to external physical circumstances, but to differing cultural consciousness. He even goes so far as to suggest that if populations swapped countries, the physical environments of those nations would completely transform within 50 years to match the consciousness of the new inhabitants.
And this really illustrates his macro point. He contrasts Harare's distinctly separated zoning, where commercial, industrial, and residential areas are kept totally apart, with Beijing's heavily intertwined layout. The author argues this isn't just some accident of history or geography. Rather, different national consciousnesses fundamentally dictate how a city is physically designed from the ground up.
Section 5. Societal trends and consciousness.
Expanding on this, the author highlights the stark contrast between the repressed fashion of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, where clothes were strictly uniform in yellow, gray, or blue, and individual expression was pretty much forbidden, and today's highly expressive, diverse styles. He asserts this shift wasn't just a change in available textiles, a fundamental shift in collective consciousness literally changed the physical aesthetics and realities of the world. Different eras have different consciousnesses, and that dictates the existence of that era.
He goes even further, suggesting that complex demographic trends are entirely the physical manifestation of differing human consciousness. He points to varying population growth rates between the US, China, and India. He asks, why do wealthier, highly educated couples often have fewer children, while less educated couples have more? He even questions the existence of monogamy in some regions versus polygamy in others. According to the author, all of these vastly different global realities are purely determined by human consciousness.
Using a rather controversial metric, the author points to the number 0. He claims the reason for mainland China having 0 Nobel Prize winners at the time he was writing, compared to the many in the US, is simply a matter of differing national consciousness, not intellect. It's not about one group being smarter or more foolish. It's just that if you consciously want to make a hamburger, you're not going to accidentally cook noodles.
He even applies this exact same principle to global politics. He argues that the structural reality of term limits in the United States, where a president serves a maximum of 2 terms, versus lifetime appointments or endless terms in other countries, stems entirely from the underlying consciousness of those respective nations. Basically, the political system is just a physical shadow cast by the mind of the culture.
Section 6. Designing an Infinite Future.
So, how does all of this actually apply to you and your future? Well, the text shares an anecdote about a pragmatic critic who mocked a college student. The student was daydreaming about this luxurious, seemingly unrealistic future, moving abroad, building a villa with a green lawn, swimming in a private pool, and driving a Mercedes-Benz. The critic basically told the student to stop with the wishful thinking, be down to earth, and face reality. But the author fiercely defends the daydreaming student here. He frames that pragmatic critic as an evil slave to reality, like a frog at the bottom of a well whose thinking is trapped in a narrow, materialistic worldview that just crushes youthful spirituality. Conversely, he champions the imaginative student as a creator of a better tomorrow. His point is, if you limit your mind to only what already exists, you are always going to be a slave to reality.
The text argues that adopting this unconventional mind-first thinking unlocks some pretty incredible benefits. By realizing that your thoughts create your world, you can actually transcend everyday earthly suffering. You can actively pave a sunshine avenue through life, decipher the mysteries of the universe, and, according to the author's spiritual framework, even elevate yourself beyond our single Earth to access 36 dimensional spaces. No joke. That's the claim. He encourages that young student with this powerful piece of advice, emphasizing that the universe fully rewards those who dare to consciously visualize their success. The clearer the picture of the future is in your mind, the more likely you are to physically walk right into that reality. Your feet, as he says, cannot walk west if your mind wants to go east. As we wrap up the explainer today, I'm going to leave you to reflect on the author's ultimate challenge. He firmly believes that conventional thinking keeps you trapped, but unconventional thinking sets you free. So, based on this whole fascinating worldview we've just unpacked, which path are you going to choose? Will you let the existing world shape your mind, or will you use your consciousness to create your own existence? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep expanding your mind.